Hi everyone, it's Lisa Mears here, and today I'm going to be making 3 cards with sunflowers using products from Pretty Pink Posh's September release. And in case you missed the video showing all of the products in this release, I'm going to link that unboxing video up here at the top right hand corner of this video. So let's take a look at some of the products I'll be using on my cards today. This first stamp set is called Potted Sunflowers, and you can see it has several different sunflower stamps and some sentiments that say, "Sending you sunshine and you're so kind." There are also coordinating dies to go with this stamp set. I will also be bringing in the layered sunflower stencil. This is a 4-layer stencil, so it'll make a nice sunflower background on your cards. I'll also be bringing in the Mouse Friends stamp set, so you can see all the cute little mice on this stamp set. There's also a small stamp for cheese, a flower, grapes, and a strawberry. And I will also be using the Grateful Script word die on one of my cards today. So those are some of the new products that I'll be using, but I'll also be bringing in some existing Pretty Pink Posh products such as this stamp set, which is called Bee Friends. I'll be bringing in one of the small bees from this set for one of my cards today. I will also be using a sun and a couple of the clouds from this Hugs stamp set, as well as the Picket Fence die. So I'm going to start off by showing you how I color up the sunflowers. I stamped the image on Bristol Smooth cardstock, and I'm coloring it up with my Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers, which are some watercolor markers. I'm coloring the yellow marker all over the edges of each one of the petals. And next I'm going to come in with the bright yellow marker, and I'm going to color the opposite edge of all of those petals. Next I'm going to take my blender marker and I'm going to blend where both of those colors meet. So I'm just going to blend those out to get rid of all of the white area and make a more smooth blend. If you don't have the blender marker, you can use a paintbrush dipped in water. And if you are going that route, just make sure that the tip of the paintbrush is not saturated in water because you don't want to have puddles of water on your stamped image. Next, I'm coming in with brown, and I'm going to color along the outside edge of the center circle. And then for the petals that are set back behind the petals that are on top, I am coming up a little bit on the sides of those petals just to add some shadow because they are set in the back. And I'll continue in this manner until all of the shadows are applied. Next, I'm going to add the blender marker over top of the brown shadow and just blend that in with the bright yellow color that's next to it. Once I finish that portion, I will clean off the tip of my blender marker on a paper towel, and I'll come back in and I will blend from the edge of each petal towards the center of the flower. So in other words, I'm coming in from the yellow marker that's on the edge of all of those petals, and I'm blending inward towards the center where the dark area is. And it's so important that you clean off the tip of your marker each time you go to the next petal, because you're going to end up with a darker color on the tip of the marker, and then when you start the next petal, you don't want to have that darker color on the tip of the marker because then it will show up on the yellow portion of the flower. I'm using the mustard color all over the center of the sunflower. Next, I'm using the mid-brown marker to make dots all over the center. I'm adding more dots towards the left, and I'm adding less dots towards the right. And I'm basically just following where the dots are in the original stamped image. So if you look at the ones that are not colored, you can see the dots in the center of the sunflower. So the more dots are going over the existing dots and the less dots are going over the white area. For the leaf, I used olive green along the center line, and then I used the mid green just outside of that and then I'm using the blender just to blend out towards the edge of the leaf. I will color the rest of those sunflowers off camera, and then I will move on and I'll just show you how I color up the pot for one of the potted sunflowers. For the soil, I used mid brown, and then for the pot, I'm using mustard. And after I put the mustard down on the left edge, I come in with the blender just to blend that towards the right edge. I'm going to add some mid-brown to add some shadows and then blend that out with the blender marker. And I will use the coordinating dies to die cut all of those sunflowers. So the 3 potted sunflowers will be used on one card, and then this sunflower border will be used on another card, and I do color 3 more off camera for a total of 4 of these borders. Next up, I am going to color up this mouse from the Mouse Friends stamp set, and I'm adding sugar almond pink to the ears, the nose, as well as the cheeks. And then I'm going to take the blender and just blend that color a little bit better. And then this mouse is going to be gray, so I'm coming in with light gray along the edges, and then I'm going to use the blender to blend that towards the center of the ear. So here for the body, I'm coming in with light gray all around the outside edges of the mouse, and then I'll come in with the blender and just blend it towards the center. To add more intense shadows, I will use the dark gray marker and add some of the dark gray just along some of the edges of the mouse, and then I will come in with the blender and blend that out. So I do want to mention that these cards that I'm making today are part of a Pretty Pink Posh blog hop, where you have a chance to win a $30 gift certificate to the Pretty Pink Posh store. The blog hop starts on September 14th, but I'm participating in the 3rd day of the blog hop, which is September 16th. So there are 3 $30 gift certificates up for grabs, 1 winner for each day of the blog hop. And winners will be chosen by Pretty Pink Posh on September 21st, 2022 by 11:59 p.m. Pacific Time. I will have more information down in the description box below, as well as on my blog at lisamearsdesigns.com if you are interested in participating in the blog hop. Okay, so I did add a little bit of the sugar almond pink to the center of his belly, and then I'm just going to use the blender to blend that towards the edges. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and use the corresponding die set to die cut this out. And I'm also going to color up some of the bumblebees and clouds and the sun. So the clouds and the sun, remember, are from the Hugs stamp set, and the bumblebees are from the Bee Friends stamp set. So for the sun, I'm using the bright yellow as well as the yellow and the blender. And for the clouds, I'm using the light blue marker around the edges, and then I'm going to use the blender to blend that towards the center. The center is going to remain uncolored, so we'll just keep that white from the cardstock showing in the center of that cloud. And then for the bee, I am using the bright yellow and blending those together with the blender. And then for the black, I am using black and the blender marker. So the blender marker is going to make it look like it's going from black to light gray. And then for the wings, I am going to use the light blue and the blender. So now I'm going to work on the background for my card, and I have a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock cut to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches, and I'm adding a piece of mint tape so that only about an inch of the bottom portion of that cardstock is showing. And I'm adding some of the Distress Oxide ink in the Shabby Shutters color. Next, I'm going to remove that mint tape and cover up the green ink that I applied at the bottom portion of that cardstock. And I'm going to add some antique linen in a circle on the lower center portion of the cardstock, and then all around that circle I'm going to add the Tumbled Glass Distress Oxide ink. So I have the Tumbled Glass ink that represents the sky, and I have the green ink at the bottom in the Shabby Shutters that represents the grass. Once I finish adding ink, I'll remove the mint tape and I will set that background aside. Meanwhile, I'm using the picket fence die to die cut a piece of white cardstock. And now that I have all of my pieces colored and die cut, I'm ready to assemble my card. So I'm adding glue to the back of the picket fence and I'm going to add it to the background with the bottom edge of that picket fence matching up where the green and the blue ink meet. Next, I'm going to position all of my potted plants at the bottom on that green area. I am going to tuck my mouse behind the fence and I'm not gluing anything down right now because I want to just position everything where they go so that I can kind of see where I need to stamp my sentiment. So I go ahead and put that background layer in my MISTI. I add the sentiment stamp to the card. Here I'm just positioning the sun where I want it. I want to make sure that when I stamp my sentiment it doesn't overlap where the sun is going to go. So once I have everything where I want it to go, I remove the stamped images and then I stamp down my sentiment. And my sentiment says, "Sending you sunshine." And this sentiment is from the Potted Sunflowers stamp set. So now I can go ahead and put all of my stamped images back on my card front, position them where I want them to go, and then glue them all in place. So I'll go ahead and glue the bee down. I do have that stamp behind it. That stamp is just to show some motion. It's like a dotted line that shows the motion of the bee flying. So once I have that bee glued down, I'll go ahead and put this panel back in my MISTI so that I can stamp that stamp down where it needs to go. And I just stamped it out in some black ink. Now I'm going to go ahead and add all of my potted sunflowers at the bottom of my card. Next, I'm going to add the sun and the clouds up at the top. The clouds are going to go slightly off the edge of the cardstock layer. I am going to add double-sided adhesive foam behind one of the larger clouds and the smaller cloud to pop them up so that they are layered in front of the sun. I'm going to go ahead and turn this panel over and cut off the little bit of cloud that extended beyond the edge of the cardstock panel. And I also added some foam on the back of this last bumblebee and I'm adding it to the potted plant. I'll go ahead and add this layer to an A2 size card base. And that will complete this card. I just love this cute little fall scene with the mouse and the potted sunflowers. So moving on, I'm going to make a card using the Layered Sunflowers stencil. This is a 4-layer stencil that you can use for the background of any of your cards to make a quick and easy card. So here I have a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock cut to 4 by 5 1/4 inches. I'm adding the cardstock to my Sizzix stamp and stencil tool, and on top of that tool is a sticky grid mat which is holding my cardstock in place. That sticky grid is also holding the stencil down to the cardstock. So the stencil that you see there is the layer A, which is the first stencil in the 4 stencil set, and I'm inking that up with the mustard seed ink. I'm going to go ahead and remove that stencil and line up my next stencil. And the grid lines on the sticky grid sheet actually help me to line up the next stencil because I know where the first stencil was lined up. So then I just add the second stencil to the same spot on the sticky grid sheet. So this second stencil, layer B, I am inking up with the same mustard seed ink as I did with the first stencil. Next, I'm going to add the third stencil. This is layer C. I'm going to line the stencil up on my sticky grid sheet in the same spot, and I'm going to ink this up with the Walnut stain ink. This is the center of the sunflowers. Once that layer is complete, I will remove that stencil and I will line up the last stencil. This is stencil D. This stencil is the leaves. I will ink up the leaves with the Rustic Wilderness Distress Oxide ink. And now that background is complete. Now I could leave the background as it is here, but I want to add some extra depth to the petals of the sunflowers. So I'm going to add back stencil A to the top of my sunflowers. I'm just lining it up. And I'm going to add the Rusty Hinge Distress Oxide ink just to the center lower portion of each one of those petals. I'm just using a Q-tip to do this, and I'm going to go through all of those petals. So you can see how I did with the first row of sunflowers, and I'll go ahead and do that to the rest of this stencil. And once I finish, I'll remove it and add layer B back to the top of my panel. And I'll repeat the process using stencil layer B. Now, ideally, I should have done this part when I had the stencil initially on my background as I applied the mustard seed ink, but I wanted to show you what the completed stencil background looks like without adding a hint of a darker color to the center of the petals. So that's why I'm coming back in afterwards. So here I'm taking a detailed blending brush and I'm going along the edge or the side of the brush just to extend that line of darker orange straight up through the center of that petal. And I'll go ahead and do that for the remaining petals. And once I'm finished, I'll remove that stencil and take a look at the beautiful depth that by just adding that extra color, it adds to the sunflowers. So I went ahead and added that background to a piece of black cardstock that measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and I die cut the Grateful script word die out of black cardstock, and I'm just putting glue on the back and I'm going to add it to the center of my card. My card is going to be a landscape card. Of course, you can make it portrait if you wanted to, but I preferred to turn it sideways so that it is landscape. Next, I will add that layer to an A2 size card base. It measures 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches, and my card is complete. For my last card, I am going to be using this cute little mouse from the Mouse Friends stamp set, but this time he's being colored up brown. So the first one I showed you, I colored him up gray. This one I'm coloring him up brown. So if you want a brown mouse, this is how I do it. So just like with the last mouse, I used the Sugar Almond Pink as the pink and I added the blender to blend that out. And then the brown is going to be the mustard color, which I come all around the outline of the mouse's body and I add the mustard color. And then after it's added, I come in with the blender and I go over that mustard color with the blender and just extend that color towards the center of the mouse. So it's a little darker on the edges and lighter on the inside. And I do the same with the belly, so I'm just coloring around the belly in the mustard color and then coming in with the blender to blend it towards the center where the Sugar Almond Pink is. I'm adding a little bit of the mustard color under his chin and then I will blend that out with the blender. I'm also going to put a strawberry in his hand, so I stamped out a strawberry and I color the strawberry up with red and the blender, and then the leaf is the olive green and the blender. And I'll go ahead and die cut those two stamps using the corresponding dies. I'm going to heat emboss the sentiment, so I added some powder from my Pink and Main Magic Anti-Static brush to my black cardstock, and then I'm stamping out the sentiment with some Versamark ink. I'm going to add some white embossing powder over the sentiment, and I'm going to heat set that. My sentiment says, "You're special." Next, I'm taking a piece of white cardstock that I cut to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches, and I'm going to arrange 4 of the sunflower border strips to make a rectangular frame in the center of this card panel. I found it easiest to glue the sunflower stamps to each other before adding them to the actual cardstock layer. And once they were glued together to form a rectangle, I then added glue on the back of the entire rectangle and added it to the white piece of cardstock. I added the mouse inside and I also cut down the sentiment strip into a rectangle. So the sentiment strip will go under the feet of the mouse. And then I'll add the strawberry to its hands. So I'll add that layer to a piece of black cardstock, and the black cardstock measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. And then that will go on an A2 size card base that measures 4¼ by 5½ inches. So I hope you liked my sunflower cards today. If you are interested in purchasing any of these products, I will have links in the description box below as well as on my blog. And if you like to see videos like this, be sure you click that subscribe button and turn on your bell notifications so that you'll be notified every time I release a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.